I want to give you two numbers. 560,000. That is the size of the army that marched on Pengcheng in the spring of 205 BC. 500,000 soldiers drawn from 5 allied kingdoms, moving in from 3 directions, converging on a single city. The largest coalition force ever assembled in Chinese history to that point. A force so vast that modern historians still debate how it was fed, how it communicated, how it moved as anything resembling a single thing. And the second number, 30,000. That is the force that destroyed it. Not held it off, not survived it, destroyed it. Completely, in half a day, while the sun was still climbing. 30,000 against 560,000, 1 to 18.7. In the entire recorded history of ancient warfare, Greece, Rome, Persia, Carthage, the Mongol steppe, there is no battle with a numerical gap of this scale where the smaller side won completely. Not Thermopylae, not Cannae, not Gaugamela. Nothing comes close. This is the story of how it happened. And this is the story of why the man who did it, the man who pulled off the most lopsided military victory in the ancient world, still lost everything in the end. To understand that fight, you first need to understand who Xiang Yu was and what kind of world he had been thrown into. When Qin Shi Huang, the first emperor of China, the man who unified 6 kingdoms by force and ruled them with iron, died in 210 BC, the empire he built began collapsing almost immediately. Within 2 years, rebellions were burning across every province. The old kingdoms that Qin had destroyed were trying to resurrect themselves. Warlords were carving out territory. The center was gone. In a world like that, Xiang Yu was the strongest man. He came from the nobility of the Chu state. One of the 6 kingdoms Qin had annihilated. His grandfather, Xiang Yan, was Chu's greatest general, a man who died on the battlefield fighting the Qin conquest. The Qin had destroyed everything his family built. Fighting was not a choice he made. It was what he was made for. On the battlefield, he was something that defied categorization. Physically enormous, capable of commanding the full attention of thousands of men simply by being present. His soldiers followed him because they believed, in a way that bypassed rational thought, that they could not lose while he was there. At the Battle of Julu in 207 BC, he proved them right. The Qin army had surrounded the kingdom of Zhao. The other rebel commanders had arrived to help, and then stopped, camped on the surrounding hills, watching. They were scared. The Qin force below was nearly 300,000 strong, organized and veteran. The calculus of survival said, wait. Xiang Yu did not wait. He was serving under a Chu general named Song Yi, who had been stationary for 40 days, running political calculations, looking for angles. Xiang Yu killed him, took command, ordered his men to smash their cooking pots and sink their boats. 3 days of rations, no retreat possible, and attacked. He fought 9 consecutive engagements in a single day. The Qin army broke. 50,000 against 300,000, and he was simply unstoppable. This is who Xiang Yu was, a world full of men playing chess. Calculating, waiting, looking for the moment to move a piece. And he was something that did not play chess. He was a wolf dropped into a room full of chess players. And a wolf does not study the board. It finds the throat. For a time, this was enough. After Julu, the other rebel commanders came down from their hills and knelt before him. Zhang Han, the greatest Qin general alive, eventually surrendered. With him came the remnants of the Qin army. 200,000 men. The Qin dynasty fell shortly after. Xiang Yu marched into the ruins of the empire that had destroyed his grandfather's world and made the decision that would define everything that followed. He did not make himself emperor. Instead, he divided China into 18 kingdoms, returned power to the old noble families, and named himself Hegemon King of Western Chu. The strongest among many, not the ruler of all. Qin was gone. The 6 kingdoms were restored. 18 lords across a divided China owed their thrones to him. He stood at the top of everything he had ever fought for. He had won. He just didn't know what winning was for. But before we talk about the most lopsided military victory in the ancient world, we need to talk about a single night, 2 years earlier, that has been debated for more than 2,000 years. A decision so consequential that it shaped not just this war, but the entire trajectory of Chinese history, and a decision that, even today, historians cannot agree on. I want you to hear it, and I want to know what you think. 200,000 prisoners. Xiang Yu stood before them and faced a problem with no clean solution. History usually moves past this moment quickly, labels it a massacre, labels him a monster, and continues. But if we slow down and actually look at what he was facing, the picture becomes considerably more complicated and considerably darker. Because this was not a man losing his temper, this was a man doing the math. The food problem. Xiang Yu commanded a coalition of roughly 400,000 soldiers drawn from multiple kingdoms. These men were already marching through a landscape stripped bare by years of war. Grain stores were gone, supply lines were stretched. Feeding 400,000 was already a daily crisis. Adding 200,000 more mouths, men who were prisoners, who had no reason to cooperate, who would need to be fed before his own soldiers, was not a logistical challenge. It was an impossibility. To feed the prisoners was to let his own army starve. To feed his army first was to watch 200,000 prisoners slowly become 200,000 desperate, hungry, angry men with nothing left to lose. There was no version of keep them fed that worked. The loyalty problem. These were Qin soldiers, and the men standing around them had not simply fought against Qin. For 15 years, Qin Shi Huang had erased their kingdoms, destroyed their noble families, and ruled what remained with a brutality that left no room for mercy or memory. The hatred in that camp was not political. It was the hatred of men whose nations had been annihilated, whose people had been ruled into the ground, and now the soldiers who represented all of that were sitting unarmed in the dirt in front of them. Keeping 200,000 Qin prisoners alive in the middle of an army that wanted them dead was not just logistically difficult, it was politically explosive. Xiang Yu needed his coalition bound together. Blood. Shared blood, the blood of a common enemy, was one of the few things that could do it. The whisper problem. And then the rumors started. Among the Qin prisoners, a story began to spread. If they marched to the Qin capital and the campaign failed, Xiang Yu would sell them into slavery. Their families back home would be punished. There was no future in surrender, only a slower death. Were these rumors true? It does not matter. What matters is that 200,000 men believed them, and 200,000 men who believe they are already dead are not prisoners. They are a rebellion waiting for the right moment. Xiang Yu did not have a system for managing 200,000 men on the edge of revolt. He had an army and a deadline. The geography problem. And then there is the terrain. The route from Xin'an to the Qin capital runs through mountain passes. Narrow corridors where a marching column compresses into a line, where 600,000 men become a single file moving through a funnel. In that terrain, if the Qin garrison inside the capital launched a counterattack from the front, while 200,000 prisoners rose up from within, Xiang Yu's army would be destroyed. Caught between two forces in a pass with nowhere to move. The mathematics of that scenario had one outcome. The clock problem. And underneath all of it, time. Liu Bang, the man who would become the first emperor of the Han dynasty, was moving toward the Qin capital from the west, through a different route. Fewer obstacles, less resistance. Every day Xiang Yu spent managing 200,000 prisoners was a day Liu Bang moved closer to Shanyang. Whoever entered the capital first would hold the claim to the realm. That was the prize. That was what this entire war had been building toward, and the clock was running. So Xiang Yu made his decision. He buried them at Xin'an, all 200,000, in a single night. Now, was there another way? It is worth asking, and the honest answer, viewed from any angle, is probably not. Modern military historians who study this period reach the same conclusion through different frameworks. A prisoner population of 200,000 in a pre-industrial army with no supply chain, no detention infrastructure, and no time is not a humanitarian problem. It is a threat multiplier. Every day those men remained alive was a day they could organize, a day they could receive outside help, a day the clock ran down on Xiang Yu's window to reach Shanyang. He had no good options. He had one option that solved the immediate problem and created a catastrophic long-term consequence, and one option that preserved the long-term consequence while guaranteeing a short-term disaster. He chose the first one. Any commander operating under the same constraints, on the same timeline, with the same information, would have faced the same impossible calculation. History does not deal in second chances. It does not run the alternative scenario. It only records what happened and what followed. What followed was 560,000 men marching toward him 2 years later. Spring 205 BC. Xiang Yu is in the north, fighting yet another rebellion. This time in the kingdom of Qi. This is what his life had become since dividing China into 18 kingdoms after the fall of Qin. 18 kingdoms means 18 potential fires. And he is the only man capable of putting them out, which means he is always somewhere, always moving, always arriving at the last crisis while the next one forms behind his back. In his absence, Pengcheng, his capital, sits lightly defended. Liu Bang sees it. He assembles his coalition of 560,000 from 5 allied kingdoms and marches east. Pengcheng falls without meaningful resistance. There is almost no one there to fight. And then the coalition army does what armies do when they take a city without a fight. They celebrate. Xiang Yu's palace, his treasury, his concubines, his accumulated wealth from years of conquest. All of it suddenly available, suddenly unguarded. Soldiers eat and drink and stop being soldiers. The coalition, 5 kingdoms marching under 5 banners with 5 sets of priorities, loses whatever coherence it had. There is no unified command. There is no prepared defense. There is just 500,000 men enjoying a city they just took for free, convinced the war is effectively over. It is not over. News reaches Xiang Yu in the north. He does not panic. He does not abandon the campaign in Qi entirely. Leaving it unsettled is its own problem, and he understands that. He issues orders to his generals to continue fighting there, and then he personally selects 30,000 of his finest cavalry and turns south. He is not retreating. He is not scrambling. He is hunting. Before we talk about what happens next, I want to put the number in its proper context. Because 30,000 against 560,000 is the kind of ratio that is easy to say and almost impossible to actually feel. Hannibal at Cannae. 216 BC, the battle that military historians still study as perhaps the greatest single tactical performance in Western history. Hannibal surrounded and annihilated a Roman army with roughly 50,000 troops against 86,000. A ratio of about 1 to 1.7. Generals have been trying to replicate that double envelopment for 2,000 years. It is still taught in military academies. It is still considered a near-perfect battlefield execution. Alexander the Great at Gaugamela. 47,000 Macedonians against a Persian force estimated between 100,000 and 250,000. At the most generous estimate, 1 to 5, Alexander's greatest victory, the battle that broke the Persian Empire. These are the benchmarks of military genius in the ancient world. These are the numbers that make historians run out of superlatives. Xiang Yu at Pengcheng, 1 to 18.7. In half a day. Now, how? The answer is not magic. It is a precise reading of a specific situation, executed at absolute speed, by a man who had done this kind of thing enough times to understand something that most commanders never learn. A large army is only as dangerous as its ability to organize. Remove that ability, and the numbers mean nothing. He went west. Not the obvious direction. Not the direction Liu Bang was watching. He came through Xiao County, a gap in the defensive perimeter that no one had covered because no one had imagined an attack from there. He made camp in the night, invisible. At dawn, he moved. The Chu cavalry hit the Han encampments while men were still sleeping. The surprise was total. Panic moves through an unprepared force the way water moves through a broken dam. It does not stop at the edges. It keeps going. It takes everything with it. The soldiers at the front did not know what was happening at the back. The 5 coalition commanders could not coordinate. Liu Bang himself barely escaped. Fleeing with a few dozen cavalry, his father and wife captured, his coalition dissolving in every direction. By noon, it was over. More than 100,000 Han soldiers drowned in the Sea River trying to flee. Another 100,000 died at the Sui River. The bodies blocked the current. The river stopped flowing. Xiang Yu did not defeat 560,000 men. He found the exact moment when 560,000 men were just a crowd. And he hit them before they could remember they were an army. This is where the story should end in triumph. Xiang Yu had just delivered the most lopsided military victory in the ancient world. Liu Bang was broken, his coalition shattered, his allies defecting, his family in Shu hands. The war was effectively over. Xiang Yu did not pursue him. He turned his attention to the starving civilian population of Pengcheng and distributed his army's provisions to them, a genuine act of humanity and a catastrophic strategic failure. This was not the first time he had let Liu Bang survive. 2 years earlier at the feast at Hong Gate, his advisor Fan Zheng had arranged for Liu Bang to be killed at dinner. Xiang Yu canceled it. Not out of mercy, out of contempt. Liu Bang seemed too small, too unimpressive, beneath the gesture. Hong Gate, Liu Bang lives. Pengcheng, Liu Bang escapes. The wolf caught the fox twice, and twice the wolf walked away. Xiang Yu was a wolf dropped into a world full of chess players, and the wolf does not understand chess. It does not need to. It finds the throat, and it wins, every single time, on every single battlefield. Liu Bang understood this world completely. He was not a warrior. He was not a genius. He was a man who knew how to make other people want to follow him, through patience, through keeping promises, through the simple, radical act of treating people as resources to be cultivated rather than problems to be solved. At Gaixia in 202 BC, Xiang Yu was surrounded for the last time. He broke through the encirclement with 800 men. By the time he reached the Wu River, he had 28 left. A boat was waiting. "Go back to Jiangdong," the boatman said. "Cross the river. Go home. Rebuild. Come back." Xiang Yu looked at the river. On the other side was home. The land that had given him his first 8,000 soldiers at the very beginning of everything. He thought about the fathers and elders who had trusted him with those young men. "Even if they were willing to forgive me," he said, "how could I ever look them in the face?" He sent his horse across to save the animal. Then he turned around. 28 men against thousands. He fought until he could not stand. He died on the bank of the Wu River. He was 30 years old. More than 2,000 years later, in China, Xiang Yu is still remembered. Not with the reverence given to emperors and dynasties, with something warmer than that, with something closer to love. Liu Bang founded the Han Dynasty, one of the greatest empires in human history. His descendants ruled for 400 years. The Chinese people still carry his dynasty's name. And yet it is Xiang Yu they write poems about. It is Xiang Yu they remember on the bank of the Wu River, sending his horse across to safety, turning back toward the army that would kill him. It is Xiang Yu's final night at Gaixia, drinking alone, composing a poem for a woman who had followed him through everything, that has survived in Chinese literature for 2 millennia. Perhaps because the world has always had enough foxes. And there is something in us, something that recognizes, across all the distance of history, what it means to watch a wolf who never lost a single battle lose the war. He could not play chess. He never learned. He never needed to. He was Xiang Yu, and on every battlefield he ever stood on, that was enough. It just wasn't enough for everything else.